I used to believe summers were supposed to feel endless, like long days stretching into warm nights, filled with things that made sense. But the summer I turned 13, nothing made sense anymore. My mom and I had just moved to a small rural town called Cedar Hollow after the kind of breakup people whisper about at church. I didn't want to hear the details, but I saw how my mom's eyes stayed red for weeks, how bills piled up, how she whispered on the phone about starting fresh. The house she rented was half the size of our old one, sitting at the edge of a neighborhood where every backyard seemed to melt into the woods. The trees were tall and quiet, like they watched everything. I felt angry at first, angry at my mom, at my dad for leaving, at the whole idea of starting from scratch. The first week I barely left my room. The only thing that got me outside was the knock on the door one afternoon. A boy about my age stood there holding a soccer ball. "You the new kid?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm Mason. I live 2 houses down. You want to hang out?" I didn't, not really. But the silence inside our house felt heavier than the heat outside, so I followed him. Mason was the kind of kid who could make anything sound like an adventure. He showed me the woods behind our neighborhood and a narrow trail that led to a hidden creek. Clear water trickled between smooth stones. "This is our spot," he said proudly. We spent afternoons catching frogs, daring each other to cross the creek on fallen logs, and pretending we were pioneers mapping new territory. For the first time since we moved, I felt something close to okay. One evening, as fireflies floated above the weeds, Mason said, "Told you Cedar Hollow isn't all bad." Maybe he was right. Maybe this town could be a new start after all. I just didn't know yet that not everything, or everyone in those woods, was as harmless as they seemed. Mason and I were hiking along the creek one humid afternoon when we heard branches snapping behind us. We spun around, and a tall older man with silver hair stepped through the brush. He carried an old camera around his neck and a bulky backpack. "Didn't mean to startle you boys," he said with a friendly smile. "Name's Carver. I'm a retired wildlife photographer. These woods are my office now." Mason relaxed instantly. "You take animal pictures? Like for magazines?" Mr. Carver chuckled. "Used to. Traveled everywhere. Bears in Alaska, wolves in Montana. Now I just photograph whatever comes my way." He opened his backpack and pulled out a bag of trail mix. "Want some?" I hesitated. My mom always said never take food from strangers, but Mason grabbed a handful like it was nothing. So I did too. Over the next couple of weeks, we ran into him often, almost too often. Sometimes he'd appear just as we reached the creek. Other times, he'd already be sitting on a fallen log, sketching bird shapes in a notebook. He told stories about dangerous hikes he'd taken, storms he'd survived, animals that had gotten too close for comfort. Mason soaked up every word. I did too, if I'm honest. There was something steady about him, calm in the way adults rarely were around me. One day, when Mason ran home early for dinner, Mr. Carver stayed behind with me. He asked gentle questions about my life, how the move had been, whether I missed my old friends, whether my mom was doing okay. It felt nice having someone listen without rushing me. "You're a thoughtful kid," he said. "Kids like you, well, sometimes you need someone who understands you in ways other people don't." I remember nodding, even though something inside me shifted. A small, uneasy feeling. Nothing clear, just enough to make me change the subject. Still, I walked home feeling oddly lighter, thinking maybe he was right. Maybe he did understand me. But I had no idea those conversations were moving into places I wasn't prepared for, places no kid ever should be. The more the summer went on, the more Mr. Carver sought me out, especially when Mason wasn't around. Sometimes I'd be heading to the creek alone, and he'd appear behind me like he'd been waiting. He'd ask deeper questions each time. "Do you ever feel like you have to be the adult in your family? Does your mom talk to you about grown-up problems?" Do you ever feel like people take you for granted? The questions weren't wrong exactly. They just felt personal, too personal. But he always asked them with such soft concern that I brushed it off. Then he started talking about bonds. You know, he said one day while we sat by the water, real connections don't happen often. Sometimes you meet someone who gets you better than family does. I didn't know what to say. I was 13, confused, trying not to disappoint someone who seemed to care. You ever feel closer to me than anyone else? He asked. His eyes didn't match the smile on his face. I looked away. I don't know. It's okay, he murmured. Some things can stay between us. Special things. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. When I told Mason about it later, he shrugged. Dude, he's just being friendly. Chill. Maybe I was overthinking it, I told myself. Adults acted weird sometimes. My dad sure did. But the uneasiness didn't go away. The moment everything cracked open came on a hot, quiet afternoon when Mason was out of town visiting cousins. I went to the creek alone, something I instantly regretted. Mr. Carver showed up minutes later. He sat beside me, closer than usual. Too close. You know, he said softly, real family shows affection differently. They trust each other more. They share things others wouldn't understand. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It lingered. You matter to me, Lucas, he whispered. Let me show you how much. My throat closed. My skin prickled with fear. I could barely breathe. I didn't think. I ran. Hard. Branches whipped against my arms as I sprinted home, every step fueled by terror I didn't know I could feel. And for the first time all summer, I understood exactly what those uneasy feelings had been trying to tell me. When I burst through the front door, my mom dropped her coffee mug. It shattered across the kitchen tiles, but she barely noticed. Lucas, what happened? She said, grabbing my shoulders. I couldn't get the words out. They came in broken pieces. Creek, Mr. Carver, too close. Until everything spilled into one long, shaking confession. She held me tight, and I finally started sobbing, the kind of crying that hurts your whole chest. Mom called the police but kept her voice low, controlled. I realized then she wasn't just protecting me. She was fighting her own fear, the fear of what could have happened. 2 officers arrived an hour later. They asked gentle questions, not pushing too hard. They said I wasn't in trouble, that I did exactly the right thing. I believed them, but I still felt small, embarrassed, angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. The investigation happened quietly. No sirens, no loud confrontations. Just conversations with neighbors, checking records, stopping by Mr. Carver's house. Mrs. Dunley from up the road said she'd seen him around kids before. Too friendly, she murmured. Another neighbor said he'd taken long walks with a boy last summer, but stopped showing up when the boy's father confronted him. Everything pointed to something being wrong, but nothing was enough to charge him. By the 4th day, the officers knocked on our door with an update. He's gone, one of them said. Left town overnight. House is empty. My mom thanked them, but when she closed the door, she leaned against it as if the air had been knocked out of her. I didn't feel relieved, just hollow, like someone had carved out the part of my summer that used to feel safe. They won't find him, will they? I asked. Mom wrapped an arm around me. What matters is he can't hurt you now. But part of me wondered if he'd already taken something I couldn't get back. Weeks passed. Cedar Hollow went on like nothing had happened. Kids rode bikes down gravel roads, sprinklers clicked on in the evenings, and the woods behind our neighborhood stayed as quiet as they'd always been. But something inside me had changed. Mason finally came home from his trip, bursting with stories, unaware of the storm that had crashed through my life while he was gone. When I told him everything, he didn't know what to say. He kept repeating, "Dude, I had no idea. I didn't blame him. I barely understood it myself. Eventually, we went back to the creek. We stood at the edge of the water, neither of us talking. The place looked the same, sunlight on the rocks, dragonflies skimming the surface, but the carefree part of it was gone. "You ever think it'll feel normal again?" he asked quietly. "Maybe," I said. "Just not the same kind of normal." He nodded. "Still our spot, though." "Yeah," I said. And it was. Just different now. That summer became the moment I learned the world wasn't as simple as I'd thought. Some adults weren't who they pretended to be. Some kindness wasn't kindness at all. But I also learned something else. Speaking up doesn't make you weak. Running away from danger isn't cowardly. And telling the truth, even when your voice shakes, can be the bravest thing you ever do. Mom told me healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small steps. Like noticing I slept through the night again. Like laughing at one of Mason's dumb jokes. Like walking into the woods without feeling that tight knot in my stomach. I'm older now, but I still think about that summer, not because of what almost happened, but because of what I learned about trust, courage, and the kind of people who deserve a place in my life. Somewhere out there, Mr. Carver disappeared into another town, another trail. But he didn't break me, and he didn't get to define what I became. I did. Trust is powerful, but it should be earned, not taken. Even people who appear kind can hide dangerous intentions. Always listen to your instincts. Speak up when something feels wrong. And remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to protect yourself and others despite it. You have the right to be safe, the right to be heard, and the right to walk away from anyone who tries to use trust as a weapon. People think growing up near a forest sounds peaceful, like running barefoot through wildflowers and falling asleep to crickets. But the woods behind my childhood home weren't like that. Not even close. We lived on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a small rural town where everybody knew everybody, and folks bragged about hunting seasons more than high school sports. Our house sat at the end of a gravel road that ran straight into an expanse of trees. Tall, old pines that stood like a wall against the sky. When I was 8, I noticed something strange. After sunset, the woods went silent. Completely silent. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Just a stillness so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. I told my family, but they laughed it off. "Woods get quiet at night," my dad said. "Means the animals are tucked in." But animals didn't tuck in like that. Not all at once, not every single night. As I got older, the feeling of being watched from the treetops always crept in around dusk. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly. It was more like standing on a stage, knowing someone in the crowd was staring straight at you. I tried to ignore it, but the unease grew with me. By the time I left for college, I swore I'd never move back. But life has a way of circling you right back to the place you tried to leave. My parents went on a long anniversary trip, asking me to house sit for 3 days. "You know the routine," Mom said cheerfully. I did. Too well. The first night wasn't terrible. I kept all the lights on, pretended the quiet was just nostalgia messing with me. But when the sun dipped behind the pines and the silence settled over the yard like a heavy blanket, that old childhood fear rose up again. I tried telling myself I was older now, grown, rational. But as I stood at the kitchen sink watching the dark tree line press against the horizon, it felt like the forest had been waiting for me to come home. The second night was worse. The kind of worse that doesn't announce itself, just slides slowly into the room like a shadow under a door. I spent the day cleaning, mowing the yard, doing anything to avoid looking at the tree line. But by late afternoon, the wind died completely. No movement. Not in the grass, not in the branches. Even the air felt heavier, like everything around me had paused mid-breath. Around 8, I stepped out onto the porch with a soda and tried calling my parents. No signal. Typical for our area, our service always tanked when storms were nearby, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. As the sun set, the woods turned black. Not dark, black. I could see the outline of trees, but nothing beyond them. The silence felt wrong, like the world was muffled from the outside in. At 9:14, yes, I checked my phone, I heard the porch light buzz. It flickered once, twice, then stabilized. I exhaled, laughing nervously at myself. But then the light flickered again, this time brighter, like it was trying to catch my attention. I looked toward the forest and froze. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its silhouette was sharp against the faint light from my porch, arms at its sides, head tilted slightly as if listening. I blinked hard. When I looked again, the figure hadn't moved. But the silence around me deepened. I stepped backward into the house, closed the door, and locked it, even though the figure hadn't moved an inch. For a long time I paced the living room muttering, "It's a person, just someone messing with me." But deep down I knew, no normal person stands that still for that long. I checked the window again 10 minutes later. The figure was closer, and I never saw it move. By then, panic had crawled so far up my spine I could taste it in my mouth. I shut the curtains, grabbed my phone, and called my friends, Darren and Leah, two people who never let me live anything down, but who also never ignored a late-night call from me. "Dude, you sound freaked," Darren said. "We're on our way. 20 minutes." I paced until the floorboards groaned under me. Every so often, curiosity got the best of me. I'd lift the curtain just an inch, and every single time the figure was closer. Not running, not lunging, not creeping, just closer. By the time headlights swept across the driveway, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for an hour. I sprinted out to meet them, practically dragging them inside. "Okay," Leah said, hands on her hips. "Tell us what's going on before you give yourself a stroke." "There's someone in the woods," I said. "They've been moving closer whenever I look away." Darren grinned. "Like a horror movie? Come on." He walked toward the living room window before I could warn him. He pulled the curtain aside, only an inch, and he froze. "What?" Leah asked. He didn't answer. I walked up beside him, heart pounding. Slowly he opened the curtain wider. The figure stood right at the window, pressed against it. A tall shadow with its face lost in darkness. No eyes, no outline. Just darkness where a face should be. Leah gasped, stumbling back. "No, no, no, no!" The lights flickered. When they came back on, the figure was gone. But the glass was fogged. A long smear trailed down it, like breath sliding toward the latch. Something had been right there, watching us, and it had exhaled. We didn't argue about leaving. We didn't gather our things. We didn't wait for another flicker of the lights. We ran. The three of us bolted to Darren's truck so fast we nearly tripped over each other. As he fumbled with the keys, Leah kept repeating, "Drive, drive, drive," her voice cracking with panic. When the engine finally roared to life, Darren punched the gas. Gravel spat behind the tires as the house shrank in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes locked on the tree line, half expecting something to emerge from the woods and chase us down the road. Nothing moved, but that only made it worse. We stayed at Leah's place for the night. Her parents didn't ask many questions. Maybe the look on our faces told them enough. The next morning, we returned with the sheriff's deputy. I wanted to believe we wouldn't see anything. Maybe it had all been some strange hallucination brought on by stress and childhood memories I never outgrew. But as we approached the house, the deputy stopped walking. "Well," he murmured, "something was definitely here." Deep footprints, long, narrow, and spaced too far apart for any normal person, led from the tree line to the porch. Some prints were pressed so deep they nearly shaped the dirt like clay. The deputy crouched down, measuring one with his hand. "That's odd." No kidding. He followed the tracks around the house, straight to the window where the figure had stood. The smear on the glass was still there. "Could have been a trespasser," he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. "Could have been someone playing a prank." But no prankster leaves footprints like that, and no prankster stands still for hours without bending, fidgeting, or making a sound. The deputy took photos, filed a report, and promised extra patrols. I nodded, pretending that made me feel better. But the second he left, I locked every door, grabbed my keys, and swore I wouldn't spend another night in that house. Some places don't feel safe for a reason. Sometimes your instincts know the truth before anyone else will say it. My parents returned 2 days later, suntanned and cheerful until they saw the look on my face. I told them everything, every detail, every shadow, every flicker of the porch light. At first, they brushed it off the way they always had. "Honey, fear can make shapes out of nothing." But when the sheriff visited to follow up, showing them the photos of the footprints, their smiles faded. Mom's hand shook as she held the picture. Dad locked the doors twice that night. We sold the property the following spring. My parents never admitted it was because of what happened, but the nervous glances and stiff silences told the truth. Now, years later, I avoid that road entirely. But sometimes when I'm driving through town, I catch a glimpse of those same dark pines pressing against the sky, and in the space between them, just for a second, I swear I see a shape standing too still, too tall, too patient. I know it's probably my mind playing tricks on me. Memories can be shadows that follow you long after the fear is gone. But part of me wonders if whoever, or whatever, stood at my window that night never really left. Maybe it's still there. Maybe it's always been there. Maybe the woods were never silent because they were empty. Maybe they were silent because something was listening. Either way, I don't look too closely when I drive by. Some things don't need to be confirmed to be true. Some things are better left in the trees. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, whether it's a place, a situation, or a presence, listen to that quiet voice inside you. Fear isn't always your enemy. Sometimes it's a warning meant to protect you. Never ignore the signs your environment gives you, because awareness and caution can be the difference between danger and safety. Breakups leave you with two choices: stay somewhere you're miserable, or start over somewhere you hope isn't worse. At 29, I chose the latter. After ending things with Nathan, who loved control more than he ever loved me, I packed what I owned into my hatchback and signed a lease on a tiny rental house on Meadow Lane. It wasn't perfect. The siding peeled like sunburn, the floors sloped just enough to make a marble roll on its own, and the landlord, Mr. Hughes, looked like someone who hadn't slept since 1985. But the place was quiet, and more importantly, it was mine. "Only thing to know," he said during the walkthrough, tapping the wall with his knuckle. "These walls are thin. You'll hear the house settle, maybe a raccoon on the roof sometimes. Nothing harmful." I nodded, not thinking twice. After sharing an apartment with a man who slammed cabinets every time he was annoyed, I figured I could handle a few creaks. The first 2 nights were peaceful enough. I worked from the kitchen counter, unpacked slowly, and tried to feel the place out. A new beginning, a new quiet. But on the third night, something woke me just after 1 a.m. A soft dragging sound, like fabric pulled across wood. It came from the spare bedroom I never used, the one with nothing in it but dust and an old ceiling fan. I told myself it was the pipes, or the house adjusting to the cold. Old homes do that, right? When I checked the room the next morning, the door, which I always left wide open, was tightly shut. I laughed nervously at myself. Probably closed it without thinking. Except I remembered leaving it open. I remembered because I stood in the doorway brushing my teeth, telling myself the place would feel less eerie once I decorated it. But I shrugged it off. I didn't want to be the woman who moved into a new house and immediately freaked herself out over nothing. I had come here for peace. I wanted to believe the house wanted the same. By the end of week 1, the dragging sound became a familiar bedtime visitor. It always happened after midnight. Sometimes soft, sometimes a steady scrape, drag scrape that seemed to go on forever. I'd lie in bed with my eyes squeezed shut, blanket tucked under my chin like I was 10 years old again. "Old house," I whispered into the darkness. "Just the house?" But houses don't breathe, and that's what it eventually sounded like something taking slow, heavy breaths behind a wall. One night I walked down the hallway, ready to prove to myself it was nothing. The moment my hand touched the spare bedroom doorknob, the sound stopped. A clean, sharp silence. Like whatever was making noise suddenly held its breath. I opened the door fast, flicking the light on. Nothing. Just dust and emptiness. Still, the next morning, the door was shut again. Not just nudged closed, pulled tight, like someone had gripped the edge and yanked it shut. I mentioned it to my mom on the phone, trying to sound casual. "Probably airflow," she said. "Old places shift, doors move, don't psych yourself out." I wanted to believe her. I tried. But on the 10th night, the dragging sound grew rhythmic and deliberate. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause, repeating like someone dragging their foot while pacing. I sat up in bed, heart pounding so loudly I thought the house might hear it. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, that's enough." I got out of bed, grabbed my phone flashlight, and marched to the room. The hall felt colder. My breath actually fogged. The door, open when I started down the hallway, was slowly swinging shut. Slowly. By itself. I stopped walking. The door kept moving until it clicked into place. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every lamp on, watching the hallway. At sunrise, exhausted and shaky, I opened the spare room again. The dust on the floor had faint lines in it, like something had been dragged back and forth. My stomach dropped. That was no house noise. I cleaned the spare room top to bottom the next day, partly because I wanted to feel in control, partly because I needed to see if anything disturbed the dust again. By sunset, the floor was a blank canvas. I left the door wide open, wider than before. If it closed again, I wanted no doubt. At 12:47 a.m., the dragging began. Louder this time. Faster. Like something impatient. I froze in bed. I couldn't tell if the sound was inside the room or inside the wall. It didn't matter which. It was wrong either way. By 1:03, the noise stopped, and the door closed. Just like that. This time, I didn't wait until morning. I grabbed my phone, turned on the hallway light, and shoved the door open. What I saw made my skin crawl. Dust had been disturbed again, but not randomly. There was a clean, perfect path where the floor had been swept bare, straight from the window to the closet, like feet had walked the same route again and again. Inside the closet, the clothes bar, solid metal, was bent downward in the center. Not cracked, not loose. Bent, as if someone had hung from it. I backed out slowly, hands shaking so badly I could hardly keep my phone steady. I didn't know if this was a break-in, a squatter, or something even worse. But I knew one thing. I needed proof. I bought a cheap stand and set my phone up to record overnight. I left the spare room completely empty and open. Then I locked myself in my bedroom and waited for morning. When the sun finally rose, I grabbed my phone with trembling hands. My heart pounded as I opened the video, scrubbing through hours of nothing. Until 2:47 a.m. The closet door began to open, slowly, soundlessly. Then a man, tall, gaunt, barefoot, covered in grime, stepped out. My heart nearly stopped. He walked straight toward the camera, past it, and down the hall toward my bedroom door. He stood there, listening. 6 minutes, not moving. Then he turned and climbed into the crawl space above the closet. I dropped the phone. I wasn't alone. The police arrived within 20 minutes, though it felt like an eternity as I waited on the front lawn, wrapped in a blanket, refusing to step back inside. When the officers finished watching the footage, one of them muttered, "Jesus," under his breath. They swept the house like they were entering a war zone, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the dim hallways. I stayed outside with a younger officer who kept trying to make conversation. I don't think he knew what else to do. "You're safe now," he said. I didn't correct him, though I didn't feel safe. Not even a little. 20 minutes later, one of the other officers came out through the side door, pale and shaken. "Ma'am," he said softly, "we found something." The crawl space above the closet opened into a narrow channel inside the walls. A hiding place. A system of crawl-through gaps leading into the attic. Inside, they found blankets, filthy ones, food wrappers, water bottles, and a small stack of photographs. Photos of me, sleeping, cooking, sitting on the couch, changing. Photos I never knew were taken. The officers told me I had likely startled him the night I first heard the dragging. "He probably stayed perfectly still whenever you got close," the older one said. "People who live inside houses, they learn how to be quiet." People who live inside houses. My stomach churned. They searched for him for days. Dogs, drones, deputies combing through nearby woods and abandoned buildings. But he was gone. Just gone. The worst part? They believed he'd been there long before I moved in. Before the last tenant, too. Maybe longer. My landlord claimed he had no idea. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. I didn't stay to find out. That night, I packed a single suitcase and slept in a motel with the lights on. Every creak in the building made me flinch. Every footstep in the hallway twisted my stomach, because now I knew the truth. Silence doesn't mean you're alone. Sometimes it means someone is being very, very still. I never returned to Meadow Lane. Movers collected my things while a police officer accompanied them. I didn't even step out of the car. I refused to cross that threshold again, refused to look down that hallway or see the closet where the man had emerged like a nightmare with bone-thin limbs. I found a new apartment in a busier part of the city. 3rd floor, solid walls, neighbors on every side, noise, beautiful noise, drifting through the hallways at all hours. For the first time in weeks, I slept a full night. Almost. Some nights, I wake to the memory of my bedroom door handle rattling, though it never actually moves. Some nights I imagine the soft thud of bare feet in a narrow wall, or the faint drag of fabric across wood. But I remind myself, this place has solid walls. This place isn't hiding anyone. This place is mine. Still, I don't hang clothes in my closet anymore. I don't like looking at the ceiling corners where shadows gather. I don't like silence. The police never caught him. He disappeared between one heartbeat and the next, leaving only footprints in the dust and photographs I'll never forget. Sometimes, when I'm driving and pass a worn-down house or an old building with a sagging roof, I wonder how many places like that hide someone. How many people live beside a wall without knowing there's someone else on the other side of it. I've learned to trust noises, not ignore them. Houses don't pace at night. Walls don't breathe. Closets don't open on their own. People do. People can. People did. And someone lived inches from me, breathing, listening, watching, long before I ever heard a sound. Pay attention to the small signs, even when they seem harmless. Your safety often depends on trusting your instincts, not dismissing them. Ignoring what feels wrong can open the door, sometimes literally, to dangers that hide in plain sight. If you had told me a year ago that becoming a mother would be both the happiest and most terrifying experience of my life, I would have laughed. I thought fear belonged to the pregnancy stage. Test results, ultrasounds, birth plans. No one warns you that the real fear comes later, when you're handed a tiny human and told, "Here you go, keep her alive." Matt and I had waited 5 years to try for a baby. Jobs stabilized, bills under control, a house with a small extra room we always called the nursery, even when it was just holding mismatched boxes. When our daughter, Harper, was born, we felt like we'd finally crossed some invisible line into real adulthood. Exhausted, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely. But proud in a way I never expected. The first week home was a blur of late-night feedings, burp cloths, and Googling, "Is it normal if my baby?" every hour. The pediatrician suggested a baby monitor so we could rest easier. Matt bought a video one with night vision, two-way audio, and an SD card that automatically recorded motion. Premium stuff. I joked that Harper's first years were going to look like a reality show. For a while, the monitor was a blessing. We could shower, wash bottles, even nap, knowing we'd hear every tiny fuss. But around night 6, I noticed something odd. A soft, steady breathing sound through the speaker, even when Harper wasn't in the room. At first, I dismissed it. Cheap interference, maybe the AC vent. Then the picture started flickering at night, just for a second, a quick blur of motion in the darkness that vanished before I could focus. Dust, I told myself. Night mode glitches. A new mom brain playing tricks. I didn't mention it to Matt. I figured I needed sleep, not suspicion. Looking back, those harmless little glitches were the first cracks, the first quiet warnings that something, or someone, was already in our house long before we knew it. It was 2:17 a.m. when Matt shook my shoulder. Hard. Not the gentle, "Hey honey" kind of shake, the kind people use when something is wrong. "Lily," he whispered, voice tight. "Wake up. You need to see this." My heart lurched. Harper. I shot upright, expecting to hear her crying, but the house was silent, so silent I could hear Matt swallowing. He held the baby monitor in both hands like it was a bomb. "Look," he said. I took the screen. For a few seconds, it showed nothing but the normal night vision grayscale. The crib, the mobile, the faint outline of the rocking chair. Then something moved. A figure hunched over the crib, back arched like an animal rooting through garbage. At that exact moment, the figure turned its head toward the camera. Not the body, not the shoulders, the head. A slow swivel like the joints didn't match the motion. I couldn't see its face, just the pale distortion of features in infrared. But I knew instantly the shape wasn't Matt, wasn't me, wasn't anyone who should have been in that room. "We have to go," Matt said, already halfway off the bed. "No, wait, we call the police." "She's in there, Lil." That was enough. We rushed to the nursery door, and Matt pushed it open with both hands, like expecting an attack. But the room was empty. Harper slept peacefully, the crib untouched. The only wrong thing was the window, cracked open an inch, curtains swaying like they'd been moved seconds before. And then we saw them. Faint, muddy footprints on the carpet, leading from the window toward the crib, then back out the window again. I felt cold from the inside out, the kind of cold that makes your knees weak. Matt shut the window and locked it twice. I grabbed Harper and held her so tight she stirred, confused. The police arrived 15 minutes later, checked the backyard, the fence line, the neighbor's yard. Nothing. No prints outside. No signs of forced entry. One officer said, "Probably just a monitor malfunction. Those things glitch." I wanted to scream, but instead, I nodded like a polite, terrified mother who wasn't sure her world had just cracked open. We moved Harper's crib into our bedroom the next day, I didn't care if it broke every sleep training rule in the book. I wasn't letting her out of my sight, not after seeing those footprints. Matt wanted to return the monitor, but I insisted we keep it for proof. Maybe that sounds irrational, but part of me believed the police might actually take us seriously if we had a video recording of whatever we'd seen. The next 2 nights were quiet. We barely slept, lying awake waiting for any sound. I started to think maybe the officer was right, that sleep deprivation had scrambled our brains. Maybe the footprints were older than we thought. Maybe. The monitor clicked. You know that tiny sound electronics make when they switch from still to active? A soft TK. It was 3:04 a.m. Matt sat up instantly. Lily. I hear it. I turned the screen toward us. At first, nothing. Then the figure stepped into view from the left side of the nursery. Except the nursery was empty. We were in bed, and Harper was with us, breathing softly against my chest. The figure crouched near the crib, our empty crib, and tilted its head again, too far, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Then, through the monitor speaker, we heard a voice. My voice. A gentle whisper. Shh, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's here. I felt my entire body lock. That wasn't a recording. I had never said those words in that rhythm, that tone. It was like someone trying to imitate me after hearing me only once. Matt grabbed my arm. Turn it off. Turn it off. But I couldn't move. The figure rose slowly. Taller now. Or maybe it had always been that tall, and we never saw it fully upright. It leaned closer to the camera until its face was inches from the lens, a blur of pale skin, dilated pupil, an eye that was far too wide. Then it whispered, not in my voice, not in anyone's voice I knew. Where's the baby? Matt slammed the monitor against the floor, the plastic shattering. Harper woke and cried. I clutched her like she was the only real thing left in the room. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. Morning light felt like a blessing I didn't believe in. Matt didn't say a word during breakfast the next morning. He sat at the table, hands clasped, staring at the broken monitor like it was a corpse. I paced the kitchen with Harper on my hip, fighting the urge to pack our bags and drive anywhere. Hotel, parents' house, anywhere with a lock and lights. We need to check the SD card, he finally said. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed no. But we had to know if what we saw was real or exhaustion, hallucination, paranoia clawing at our senses. Matt took the tiny card, slid it into his laptop, and opened the files. There were dozens, all labeled automatically with dates and timestamps. The earliest one was from 3 nights after we brought Harper home. Matt clicked it. The video showed the nursery in night vision. Harper asleep, tiny arms curled near her head. Nothing else. Then, after 30 seconds, the window slid open. Slowly, quietly, like someone practiced. A figure climbed inside, thin, but strong. Clothes dirty, movements jerky in a way that made my skin crawl. He walked to the crib, stood over Harper, and stayed there. For 6 minutes, not touching her, just watching. The next video showed him again, and the next. Sometimes crouched, sometimes standing, sometimes leaning over the crib so close his breath fogged the lens. I covered my mouth, trying not to scream. Oh my God, Matt whispered. He was here every night. Every night we slept thinking our baby was safe. Every night someone else had been inches from her. Matt called the police, not 911, directly to the detective who'd come before. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes. The officers watched the videos and their expressions shifted from disbelief to horror. Finally, the older officer said, "These prints you found, we recognize them." "From who?" Matt demanded. "A patient escaped last month from a psychiatric facility half a mile from your subdivision. He's been off medication for weeks. Violent history. I held Harper tighter. Did you catch him? I asked. The officer shook his head. No. And we haven't seen him since the night your monitor caught that last video. My stomach dropped. That was only 12 hours ago. We stayed in a hotel for the next 2 nights. I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every knock from a neighbor's room sent adrenaline rushing up my spine. Matt positioned the dresser against the door, even though it already had 2 locks and a deadbolt. Harper slept better than either of us, blissfully unaware of the danger she'd been in. I watched her chest rise and fall just to reassure myself she was real, warm, safe. On the 3rd night, the detective called. "We found traces near your fence line," he said. "Footprints, a scrap of fabric, but the trail goes cold at the road." "Meaning he could be anywhere," I said. "Meaning," the detective replied carefully, "he's not at your house anymore. That's all we can confirm." Matt and I looked at each other. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. We decided we weren't going back home, not yet. Not until the police found him. But there was one last thing. When Matt packed our bags earlier, he brought the broken monitor with him. I hadn't noticed until he took it out of the suitcase that night. "What are you doing with that?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "I just couldn't leave it there." He turned it over in his hands. The screen was cracked, the casing dented. It shouldn't have worked anymore, but it did. The monitor clicked. Faint, soft, unmistakable. The screen flickered to life. The nursery appeared. Our nursery. Empty, untouched since we left. And then the camera shifted, no, tilted, as if someone was holding it, lifting it. A whisper filled the speaker. "She sleeps so quietly. You should too." Matt slammed the monitor off and shoved it into the dresser drawer. We didn't speak the rest of the night. The police never found the man, and we never used a baby monitor again. To this day, sometimes when the house is quiet and Harper is asleep across the hall, I swear I hear a tiny static click, like a monitor turning on somewhere it shouldn't exist. Long drives always feel different at night, like the world shrinks down to nothing but the highway, the hum of tires, and whatever thoughts you haven't dealt with yet. I'd been on the road for 9 hours already, driving through 3 states to visit my mom after her surgery. I promised her I'd be there early tomorrow, but I wanted to push a little farther before stopping to sleep. Around midnight, my stomach twisted in a way that made me clench the wheel. I'd been living off gas station snacks and bad coffee, so I figured my body was finally protesting. When the green sign for a rest area appeared, I exhaled in relief. The rest stop sat by itself on a long stretch of highway. No trucks, no cars, no vending machines humming, just darkness and a building with a faded roof. But what caught my attention was the flickering red sign over the entrance. Nursing station. That didn't make sense. Rest stops had security booths sometimes, maybe a ranger or 2, but not clinics. Still, another cramp hit so hard my vision blurred. I parked crooked, stumbled out, and pushed through the front doors. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and old wood. Everything looked abandoned except for a single fluorescent light buzzing overhead. "Hello?" I called. "Anyone here?" For a moment, the silence stretched too long. Then a woman appeared at the end of a dim hallway. She wore outdated teal scrubs, her hair pinned in a style I hadn't seen since the 90s. "Are you all right?" she asked, smiling wider than felt natural. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "You look very pale." I just need a restroom," I said, gripping my stomach. "Nonsense," she replied warmly. "Come lie down, just for observation." She gestured toward a small exam room with spotless counters and metal equipment that looked decades old. I should have left right then, but pain and exhaustion make you listen to the wrong instincts sometimes. Even though everything in me screamed, "Don't," I stepped inside the exam room. The walls were yellowed with age, the cabinets metal indented, the sink spotless but outdated. The fluorescent light flickered above, buzzing like a trapped fly. The woman walked with slow, deliberate movements, as if she had all the time in the world. "Sit," she said gently. "It's important we assess you quickly. People come through here in very poor shape." I perched on the edge of the exam table, planning to leave the minute the cramping eased. She opened a drawer and pulled out an IV kit, older than any sterile equipment I'd ever seen. The packaging looked wrong. "Hold on," I said. "I really just need directions to the restroom." "You're dehydrated." Her smile didn't move her eyes. "You need fluids." "I don't need an IV," I insisted. "I'm not staying for this." She kept prepping the needle like she hadn't heard me, like my voice didn't matter. "People always say that," she murmured, "right before they collapse." My skin prickled. "Ma'am," I said, standing up, "I'm leaving." That's when she turned toward me, and I saw her ID badge clearly for the first time. The plastic was yellowed, the corners cracked, the name faded but readable. Elaine Morris, RN. The expiration date, 1994. And the photo, it was her. Younger, but unmistakably her. My heart punched my ribs. "Is this a joke?" I whispered. She tilted her head, her smile widening into something stretched and brittle. "I can't let you leave," she said. "Not again." Something metallic clattered behind her. I glanced past her shoulder. Shackles, attached to the exam bed's frame. The metal rings were worn, like they'd been used many times. Cold washed through me, stronger than the cramps. I edged toward the hallway, keeping my eyes on her. "I'm leaving," I said again, voice shaking. Her expression didn't change. "You always try." That was the moment I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, the sound of my footsteps echoing off tile walls. Everything behind me was silent. No chasing footfalls, no shouting, nothing. That silence was somehow worse. When I reached the lobby, I shoved the doors open so hard they slammed against the walls. The night air hit me like ice. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands shook uncontrollably as I dug for my keys. My stomach still cramped, but fear was the stronger force now. As I fumbled with the ignition, I risked a glance at the building. The woman stood in the doorway, not running, not calling out, just standing there. The flickering nursing station sign buzzed above her head, casting strange shadows across her face. Her scrubs fluttered in the night breeze, but her body didn't move at all, not even to breathe. I slammed the car into gear and tore out of the parking lot so fast gravel shot out behind me. My headlights caught her one last time, tall, rigid, her expression unchanged as she watched me leave. My heart pounded all the way down the highway. I drove too fast, hands clenched around the wheel. Every so often I checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see her walking down the shoulder. An hour passed before I saw lights from a gas station. I pulled in, parking crooked again. The attendant behind the counter was a middle-aged guy in a faded baseball cap. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. I don't know what I saw." I told him everything, word for word. The exam room, the IV, the ID badge from 1994, the shackles. Her words. "Not again." His face drained of color. "You said the rest stop off Highway 67? "Yes," I said. "About an hour back." He swallowed. "That place burned down 28 years ago." I shook my head. No. I was just there." "There's nothing there now," he said quietly. "Just the cement foundation and a historical marker. That clinic closed after a tragedy." I stepped back, trembling. "But I have dash cam footage." I whispered. His eyes widened. Son, he said, you might not want to look at that. I didn't want to look. I truly didn't. But not knowing felt worse. The attendant closed the store early. Apparently my story rattled him enough, and let me use a table by the window. I pulled up the dash cam app on my phone, scrolling until I reached the time I left the rest stop. There, I said. This is when I pulled onto the highway. The video showed my taillights illuminating the empty road. For a while it looked completely normal. Just me speeding away into darkness. Then the attendant said, "Pause it." I froze the frame. "Enhance it," he said, leaning forward. I zoomed in, and there she was, standing in the middle of the highway, dead center in my lane, her hands at her sides, as still and straight as a statue. Her scrubs were illuminated by the red glow of my taillights, and even through the grainy footage, her eyes reflected the light. Two pale glints staring directly into the camera. "She couldn't have been there," I whispered. "I didn't see her." "You weren't supposed to," the attendant murmured. "Some things show up only when you're not looking." A cold tremor moved through me. "What happened to her?" I asked. He hesitated. "They said she stayed behind during the fire, that she tried to keep patients from leaving while the building burned. Some folks died because she refused to discharge them. She believed the place needed her, even when it didn't." I stared at the pause frame again. The woman's rigid silhouette, her unblinking eyes, the outdated scrubs. "She said she couldn't let me leave," I murmured. "Not again?" The attendant swallowed. "Maybe she thought you were one of the patients who got out." I felt the room tilt slightly. I ended the video and put the phone face down. "I'm getting back on the road," I said. "Right now?" The attendant nodded. "Stick to populated exits," he warned. "And if you see her again, don't stop." Trust me, stopping was the last thing I planned to do. I drove the remaining 2 hours to my mom's house in a daze. Every highway marker made my shoulders tense. Every abandoned service road made me check my mirrors. I kept imagining a figure in scrubs walking along the shoulder, steady and silent, gaining ground with every mile. By the time I pulled into my mom's driveway at dawn, I felt hollow, exhausted, like part of me was still back on Highway 67, running. My mom opened the door in her robe, smiling sleepily, until she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked. "It's a long story," I said. I didn't tell her everything, not right away, just enough to explain why I wanted to sleep on the couch that night with all the lights on. She didn't argue. Later that evening, I rewatched the dashcam footage alone. I don't know why. Maybe to convince myself it really happened. Maybe to prove it didn't. But the woman was still there, standing exactly where she shouldn't be, locked in place by the glow of my taillights. I deleted the footage. I didn't want it. I didn't want anyone else to see it. Some things don't need to be shared. Some things are better left behind. I haven't driven that route since. Even now, years later, whenever I take a long trip, I feel uneasy at night when I pass small, empty exits. For a moment, I always expect to see a flickering sign. A dark hallway, a woman in outdated scrubs watching from a distance. The strangest part? Sometimes I swear I smell antiseptic. No matter what state I'm in, no matter how far from that burned-down building. And sometimes, only sometimes, I see a pale glint in the dark shoulder of the road, like eyes catching the light. But I never stop to check. Not again. When something feels wrong, trust the instinct that tells you to leave. Safety often depends on recognizing danger before it fully reveals itself, whether it comes from people, places, or situations that don't belong. Your intuition is a survival tool. Use it. Use. I moved into Sycamore Lane on a Wednesday that felt too bright for the life I was dragging behind me. After my breakup with Melissa, 5 years together, 3 years living together, and 1 month of sleeping on a friend's couch, I needed silence like it was medicine. My new little rental house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind with trimmed lawns, weekend barbecues, and neighbors who waved without expecting conversation. It felt safe, predictable, exactly what I believed I needed. The place across the street was the only oddball on the block. Shutters half hanging, a yard gone to brittle weeds, a crooked mailbox leaning like it had given up. The real estate agent said it had been vacant for a while, but didn't explain further. And honestly, I didn't care. A house with no neighbors meant fewer conversations about why my relationship crashed and burned. The nights were the hardest. Silence wasn't gentle the way I had hoped. It was loud. Every creak in the walls felt like a question I didn't want to answer. I spent my first week unpacking slowly, sleeping badly, and reminding myself that this was supposed to be a fresh start. But on my 5th night there, around 1 a.m, I noticed something strange. A thin, warm light flickered in the window of the supposedly empty house across the street. At first, I assumed it was a security light, or maybe a reflection from a passing car. Yet the light didn't stay still. It moved, like someone walking with a lamp. And the curtains shifted a little, the way they do when someone's watching from behind them. I told myself I was overtired, too stuck in my own head. I locked my door, closed my blinds, and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, the house looked dead again, dark, still, and empty. I tried to shrug it off, but deep down, a small, uneasy voice whispered that I hadn't imagined the light, or the feeling that someone had been looking right at me. He showed up on my porch the following Tuesday. I opened the door to find an older man standing there, late 60s maybe, wiry frame, sun-worn face, a baseball cap pulled low. He smelled faintly of old cigarettes and rain. "Morning," he said, smiling in a way that showed too many teeth. "Name's Howard. I look after the place across the street." I blinked. "The vacant house?" He chuckled. "Vacant's a strong word. Just waiting on the right buyers. I'm the caretaker until then." Nothing about him said caretaker. No badge, no keyring, no uniform. Just a faded coat and eyes that looked like they never closed all the way. He started asking questions immediately. Strange ones. "You sleep with your windows unlocked?" No. "What time you usually go to bed?" "Depends," I said, already uncomfortable. "You hear much at night?" he asked. "This street gets noisy. People don't realize how loud they are." I laughed weakly. "I haven't heard anything." He nodded, but the way he looked at me felt like he didn't believe me. After he left, walking across the street without actually entering the house he claimed to care for, I tried to put the whole exchange out of my mind. But that night, just after midnight, I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of my driveway, not moving, not talking, just staring at my house, specifically my front windows, as if waiting for me to come out and greet him. I turned off the lights and hid behind the curtain until he finally drifted back toward the other house and disappeared into the darkness. The next night at 2 a.m., he knocked. A soft, slow knock, like someone trying not to wake the neighborhood. I cracked the door open just enough to see him standing there, smiling. "You got a ladder I can borrow?" "A ladder? For what?" "The attic," he whispered, glancing up toward my bedroom window. "I need to check some things up there." "I don't have one." That was a lie. His smile widened. "Oh, then I'll have to use yours." Something cold slid down my spine as he walked away without another word. I decided I needed proof. Something more solid than a creepy feeling and a man with too many questions. So I bought a security camera, one of the cheap but reliable ones that syncs to your phone. I installed it facing the supposedly vacant house. On the first night, nothing happened. Just a few passing cars and a stray cat. Night 2, Howard showed up. The footage showed him pacing along the sidewalk like he was measuring the space between our houses. Sometimes he wandered toward my driveway. Sometimes he crossed to the vacant house. And once he stopped inches from my front door. He bent down and whispered something through the tiny gap beneath it. I turned the volume up, but the audio cracked with static, just faint hissing. But the way he leaned in, the way his lips moved, he looked like he was speaking quietly to someone inside. To me. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the walls felt amplified. Every shadow looked occupied. On the third night, the camera caught something worse. He wasn't pacing. He was standing still, staring directly into the camera lens, not blinking, not moving, just watching like he knew I was watching too. Eventually, he walked across the street and slipped behind the vacant house. The camera lost sight of him. That's when I heard the scraping in my attic. Just a faint drag of something across wood, slow, deliberate. I froze on the couch, barely breathing. I told myself houses make noises, that old beams shift, that animals find ways in. But then something tapped. 3 slow, heavy taps from above my living room ceiling. I grabbed a flashlight, hard hammering, and pulled down the attic hatch ladder. Dust rained onto my shirt. When I climbed up, my hands were shaking. I didn't find an animal. I found fingerprints along the inside edge of the hatch. Fresh ones, oily, smudged, and unmistakably human. And wedged between 2 rafters was a flashlight, not mine. The police came the next afternoon after I finally found the nerve to call. 2 officers arrived, a young guy named Morales and an older woman named Price. I expected them to roll their eyes, but instead they exchanged a quiet, tense look when I described Howard. "We've had complaints about a man matching that description," Officer Price said. "Never sticks around when we show up." I showed them the footage, the fingerprints, and the flashlight. That was enough for them to get permission to search the vacant house. I stayed on my porch while they walked across the street. It felt wrong to stand outside alone, but staying inside felt worse. After several minutes, Morales came out and waved me over. "Sir, you need to see this." The front of the house looked empty, but the deeper we walked, the stranger it felt. Dust on every surface except for a few areas, clean streaks, footprints, indentations on the carpet where someone had recently sat. But the real horror was beneath the crawl space. A small hatch in the hallway floor was pried open. The officers climbed down with flashlights, and I followed halfway until the smell hit me. Stale sweat, mildew, old food. Below were sleeping bags, empty water jugs, piles of canned food, fast food wrappers, and a stack of envelopes with my name on them. My missing mail. "How long has this been here?" Morales murmured. Price shook her head. "Months at least." But the worst part was seeing something familiar among the mess. My spare house key. The one I'd lost the week I moved in. My stomach turned. "He was in my attic," I whispered. "He was in my house." Price nodded grimly. "We think he's been moving between both properties, watching from whichever spot gave him the best vantage point. They searched for Howard, but he was gone. They canvassed the woods, the nearby streets, even the drainage culverts, but he had vanished like he'd been waiting for this moment to disappear. The vacant house was sealed off with police tape. They told me to stay somewhere else for a while. But I didn't want to run. I wanted answers. And as night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that Howard was still close, watching from somewhere new. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on, sitting in the living room with my back against the wall so I could see every doorway. My phone buzzed with messages from friends asking if I was okay, but I didn't have the energy to explain something I barely understood myself. Around 3 a.m., the house settled in that slow, creeping way old homes do. Except this time the sound didn't fade. It repeated, a soft, rhythmic creaking above me. The attic again. I grabbed the same flashlight I'd taken up before. My stomach clenched so hard I felt nauseous. The officers told me they searched the attic earlier and didn't find anyone, but I couldn't trust anything anymore. The ladder groaned as I pulled it down. Dust sifted onto my face. I climbed slowly, the air growing colder the higher I went. The beam of my flashlight cut across the rafters, the insulation, the dark corners. Nothing. No footprints this time. No flashlight. No signs of entry. Just silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the attic, a whisper. Not words. Just breath. Slow and shaky, like someone trying to stay quiet. I froze, every muscle locked. The whispering stopped. Then a soft, shuffling sound moved toward the far wall, toward the shared side of the house next door. Howard hadn't been hiding in my attic at that moment. He had been in the walls, using crawl spaces, beams, gaps, anywhere a wiry man could squeeze. I backed down the ladder, slammed the hatch shut, and ran outside barefoot. I didn't stop until I reached the police station 2 streets over. When officers returned with me, they heard it too. The breathing, faint but real, coming from inside the walls between the houses. They tore open the drywall. Nothing, just darkness and dust. But the insulation was warm, as if someone had been pressed against it moments before. Howard was never caught. I moved out within the week. The cul-de-sac looks peaceful from the highway whenever I drive past, but peace isn't always real. Sometimes it's just the surface over something rotten, and sometimes people don't live in houses. They live between them. Trust your instincts. Your fear may be alerting you to danger long before your eyes can see it. And remember, safety isn't just about locked doors, but about paying attention to the people who stand too close to them. I became a high school teacher because I believed teenagers deserved at least one adult who didn't talk down to them. I grew up in rural Oregon myself, in a logging town where half the kids had chainsaw skills before they could drive. School saved me. Books, science fairs, teachers who told me there was more out there. So when I returned to Oregon to teach environmental sciences, it felt right, like finishing a circle I never meant to draw. The wildlife reserve I chose for the field trip, Crescent Pines, was quiet, old, and according to online reviews, a peaceful place to show kids what untouched forest looks like. I'd been wanting to take my class somewhere that wasn't a textbook or a slideshow. The ranger station approved our visit, though in the confirmation email they added a strange line. Please stay within the marked areas. Do not cross any damaged boundary signs. I shrugged it off. Rural places always have superstitions. The morning of the trip, my juniors loaded into the school van with the usual energy. Loud conversations, headphones half hanging, jokes about bears. I gave the standard safety speech. No wandering, no climbing, no slipping off to smoke behind a tree. They rolled their eyes, which meant they actually heard me. When we arrived, the ranger who greeted us, Ranger Hale, looked exhausted, pale in a way that didn't match his outdoorsman build. He forced a smile, but his hands shook slightly as he passed out maps. Stay on the trail, he said. The forest gets weird past the boundary signs. Sound doesn't behave right. Birds avoid it. One of my students, Jaden, whispered, "Dude, he's totally messing with us." But Hale didn't look like he was joking. He looked like someone giving a warning he didn't think we'd take seriously. I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed how relieved he looked when we started walking the designated trail, like he was glad the trees were between him and whatever he feared. But I didn't know then that Crescent Pines was more than just another forest, and I didn't know it was waiting. The first hour of the hike was normal. The kids took photos of mossy logs, argued about which tree species was which, and complained about the uphill parts. I was proud of them. No one tried to wander, no one messed with wildlife, and everyone stayed close. Around midday, the air shifted. I don't know how to explain it except to say the silence thickened. The usual forest soundtrack, birds, insects, distant wind, slowly faded until all I could hear were our footsteps. "Is it supposed to be this quiet?" Mia asked. "Maybe a hawk's nearby," I said, trying to sound confident. "Birds get quiet when predators are around." She didn't look convinced. We continued another quarter mile when Jaden called out, "Hey, didn't we pass that tree already?" I looked back. A crooked pine, bent at the middle like someone had tried to snap it decades ago. The bark had a slash-shaped scar I recognized. "I don't think so," I said, though doubt crept in. "A lot of pines look alike." "No," he insisted. "That's the same one. I remember the weird bend." The other students murmured agreement. I checked the map, checked the compass, checked the trail marker behind us. Except, the marker behind us was gone. I blinked hard. I had seen it minutes earlier, a small green sign nailed to a stump. "Daniel?" Mia asked softly. "Where's the sign?" "I'm sure we just passed it," I said. "Maybe it fell. Let's keep moving." But as we walked, something was wrong. Each time we turned around, the last marker vanished. Not knocked over, not broken, just gone. "Someone's messing with us," Jaden muttered. No one laughed. The deeper we went, the more the silence pressed in. It wasn't normal silence. It was heavy, dense, a vacuum where even our own footsteps felt muffled. Then we heard it. A child crying. Soft at first, like a distant echo. But as we stopped and listened, the sound warped, reverberating around us, bouncing off trunks, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Is someone lost?" Mia asked. The crying shifted suddenly to a strangled wail. "We need to find them," I said, more out of instinct than logic. The students hesitated. I wish I had too. The crying grew louder as we followed it, but it stretched in impossible ways, first close, then far, then to our left when I was sure we'd heard it from the right. Each step seemed to pull us deeper into a part of the forest where the light itself looked wrong, slanted through the branches like broken glass. "Daniel," Jaden whispered, "this doesn't feel right." "It's a kid," I said. "We can't ignore them." But even I didn't believe my own words. We reached a clearing, small and circular, almost perfectly shaped. The crying stopped instantly. The abrupt silence hit like a slap. Then giggles, not from a child on the ground, from above. Mia's eyes widened. "Oh my God. Look." I followed her gaze upward and froze. Perched high in the branches of a massive fir was a figure. Humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at angles that defied anatomy. Its head was tilted, chin nearly resting on its shoulder, and its face was obscured by shadow so deep it felt like an empty socket. It giggled again, the exact same giggle we had just heard. Identical. Replayed. Not produced. The forest fell dead silent. Wind, insects, everything. Then the figure moved. Not climbed. Crawled. Jerky, twitching, like something mimicking movement rather than understanding it. It descended halfway down the trunk, paused, and tilted its head again, as if sniffing. "Run," I whispered. No one moved. The figure twitched. "Run!" I shouted. The kids bolted. Branches slapped our arms, roots tripped our feet, but adrenaline kept us upright. The figure didn't scream or chase. Just the faint, rhythmic sound of something scratching bark followed us. We ran until my lungs burned, and that's when we saw it. A ranger truck parked on a narrow service road we never should have found. Ranger Hale stood outside it, pale and shaking. He didn't look surprised at our condition, just relieved. "You stayed together," he said hoarsely. "It doesn't like groups. It waits for stragglers." His eyes darted toward the treetops behind us, and for a moment, I didn't want to turn around. Back at the ranger station, Hale locked the door and lowered every blind. The students huddled together in the lobby while I paced, trying to steady my breathing. My legs still trembled. "What did we see out there?" I demanded. Hale rubbed his temples. "I told the facility not to open the deep grounds. I told the county. Those boundary signs were put there for a reason." "What was it?" I pressed. "A pattern," he said quietly. "A presence. Old. This forest is older than the town, older than the trails. Things learned to survive out here long before humans. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." The students called their parents, voices shaking. Within an hour, the station parking lot filled with worried families. No one left without grabbing their kids' arms a little too tightly. I drove home alone, the trees whipping past like dark figures outside the window. The image of the thing in the branches replayed in my mind. Its limbs, its giggling, its unnatural head tilt. I kept checking my rearview mirror, even though I knew logically nothing could be following me. Still, logic didn't help me sleep. The next morning, I filed an incident report. The school counselor interviewed the students. The county sheriff scheduled a meeting. I waited for the phone to ring. Instead, my inbox filled with polite dismissals. Shared hysteria, forest disorientation, stress, misinterpretation. One email called it a group panic triggered by a herd of elk. Elk don't crawl down trees. I stopped arguing. I stopped attending meetings. I stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time. That night, as I sat grading papers at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A video attachment. I pressed play. The footage was taken from high above the canopy, far above where any person could climb. It showed me and my students sprinting through the trees, stumbling, glancing back in terror, recorded from the treetops. My hands went numb. A second message came through. "Next time, leave someone behind." I dropped the phone. I didn't teach the next day, or lead another field trip again. Weeks passed, but Crescent Pines never left my thoughts. I tried teaching normally again. Assignments, lectures, grading. But every time a student laughed too suddenly, I flinched. Every time I stepped outside during recess duty, I scanned the tree line. At night, I dreamed of crooked pines and giggling from above. One evening, while locking my classroom, I found something taped to the door. A photograph. A blurry shot of the school grounds, taken from high above. No note, just proof that whatever watched us in the forest wasn't bound to the forest. I quit 2 weeks later. Administration assumed burnout. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I moved to Bend, took a job at a small tutoring center, and told myself I was starting over. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind dies completely and the world feels too still, I swear I hear a faint giggle carried through the trees behind my apartment. Soft, mimicked, wrong. And whenever I take roll in my tutoring class, I check twice, because I can't shake Hale's final words to me as we left the ranger station. "Forests don't forget the ones who escape." I pray he wasn't right, but I keep every student close. Always. And I never, ever let anyone walk alone, not even to the parking lot. Because somewhere out there, past the old boundaries we were warned never to cross, something still waits. And it doesn't like groups. It waits for stragglers. Before the night everything changed, Halloween had always been my favorite day of the year. At 10 years old, the world still felt enormous and magical in ways adults forget. Back then, trick-or-treating wasn't just a tradition. It was the highlight of my fall, My neighborhood in Maple Pines was full of big old houses with wraparound porches, families who went all out with decorations, and that cozy small-town charm you only see in old holiday movies. My parents were the type who loved to embarrass me with enthusiasm. Every year, Dad carved at least 5 pumpkins, and Mom turned the whole house into a mini haunted mansion with fake cobwebs and handmade ghost cutouts taped to the windows. I loved it. I lived for it. But the year I turned 10, everything got swallowed by the biggest snowstorm our town had seen in decades. It hit fast, faster than anyone predicted. By noon on Halloween Day, ice pellets slapped the windows like handfuls of gravel, and thick, wet snow fell in sheets so heavy I couldn't see across the road. My dad kept checking the news on the living room TV, muttering things like, "They said flurries, not the North Pole." By afternoon, the town officially canceled trick-or-treating. 10-year-old me was devastated. I had a costume, a plastic pumpkin bucket, a bag full of glow sticks, and a plan to hit twice as many houses as the year before. Suddenly it all vanished under a blanket of white. Mom tried to cheer me up with hot chocolate and a stack of DVDs she rented from the library earlier that week. Cartoon Halloween specials, old monster movies, and a couple of kid-friendly thrillers. She lit cinnamon candles, popped popcorn, and told me we'd make the best of it. Dad shoveled the driveway 3 times in 2 hours and still complained he could watch it disappear as fast as he cleared it. By sunset, the storm deepened into something almost otherworldly. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling our windows. Snow clung to every inch of siding. Every house on our street glowed faintly through the storm, porch lights blurred by swirling white. Neighbors still came out just long enough to wave at each other, bundled like explorers braving some frozen wilderness. Despite the blizzard, Mom still insisted on keeping a bowl of candy by the front door, just in case. And strangely, a few families did show up, determined, frostbitten parents with tiny kids, bundled so thickly they waddled like penguins. I watched movies while my parents took turns answering the door, coming back inside each time shaking snow from their coats. But then something weird started happening. Every time Mom closed the front door, it swung open again a few minutes later. Not all the way, just enough to form a small crack and let in a cold sliver of wind. "Did you not latch it?" Dad asked. "I'm telling you, I did," Mom said. She closed it again. A few minutes later, it drifted open. I remember glancing at the door from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, feeling a strange discomfort I didn't yet have a name for. Something about the slow drift of the door, the way the wind pushed flakes of snow inside. It unsettled me. "This old frame is probably warping in the cold," Dad said, pushing it shut harder, but I saw Mom glance toward the window beside the door, watching the storm with a look that didn't match his calm explanation. I think she knew something didn't feel right. That sense, that cold prickle on the back of the neck, only grew stronger as the night went on. I didn't know it yet, but the storm had brought more than bad weather. Something else had come with it. Something that didn't leave when the door was closed. Something that wasn't finished with us. Around 9 that night, the trick-or-treaters stopped. The storm became too intense even for the brave ones. Mom left the porch light on anyway, just in case, and Dad settled into his recliner with a cup of coffee. I curled into the couch cushions watching a movie about kids trapped in a snowbound cabin. Not the best choice in hindsight. The living room felt warm and safe, the kind of safe where you almost forget the world outside is buried in white chaos. Then the door creaked open again. This time, Dad actually groaned, "You've got to be kidding me." But something about the way it happened felt wrong. I was watching directly that time. The latch didn't jiggle or release the way it usually did when the wood expanded. There was no sudden gust of wind. It eased open, slowly, gently, silently, like someone on the other side was pushing it with the softest touch. "See?" Mom said. "Something's off." Dad marched over, irritation plastered across his face. He pushed it shut, jiggled the knob, and made sure the deadbolt clicked. "There," he said. "If that opens, I'll eat a whole fun-sized bag of candy corn." "Please don't," I muttered. "That's disgusting." Mom laughed, the tension lifting for a second. But then, 20 minutes later, the door drifted open again. Just a crack, just wide enough to let in a curl of freezing wind. Dad stared at it. "Nope, absolutely not. This house is messing with me." He grabbed a folded beach towel from the hall closet, one with flamingos on it, which looked ridiculous in a snowstorm, and wedged it at the bottom of the door to block the draft. Mom shook her head. "We should call a locksmith tomorrow." "Or an exorcist," I mumbled. Dad chuckled. Mom didn't. We returned to the movie, but my eyes kept darting back to the door. I expected it to open again. I waited for it. I could feel the weight of the storm pressing against the house like a giant hand. Every window shook. Every wall creaked. It felt like the whole world wanted in. By 10:30, Mom told me to head upstairs to get ready for bed. I didn't argue. I was tired, and honestly, the door thing had worn me out. I brushed my teeth slowly, listening to the wind shriek outside the bathroom window. That's when I heard it. A creak. Soft, rhythmic. Like footsteps upstairs. In the hallway. My heart stuttered. Dad always stayed downstairs watching TV late, and Mom would have been with him. No one should have been walking upstairs. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door. Another step, then another. Slow, deliberate. The house was old, creaky, but these weren't settling noises. These sounded like weight shifting between floorboards, like someone pacing. I yanked open the bathroom door, expecting to see someone in the hallway. No one was there, just shadows stretching long and thin across the carpet. I ran to my bedroom. When I walked in, something made my skin crawl. My closet light was on. I never used it. The pull-string light bulb hadn't been touched in years. My parents didn't even know it worked. I stared at it, the pale yellow glow illuminating my hanging shirts and boxes of old-school projects. The bulb flickered slightly, humming quietly like it had been on for a while. A chill spread through my whole body. I reached in, grabbed the string, and turned it off fast. The instant the closet went dark, I slammed the door shut. Something wasn't right. Something was in the house. Maybe it had been inside longer than we realized. I locked my bedroom door, a habit I never had until that night, and stepped backward, heart pounding. That's when I saw it. A faint shadow, moving under the doorframe. Someone was standing on the other side. The shadow moved slowly, like someone shifting their weight from one foot to the other. I froze, every nerve in my body firing at once. I didn't scream. I didn't call for my parents. I couldn't. Something instinctive, something ancient, told me not to make a sound. The doorknob twitched barely, just a tiny rotation, like someone was testing it. Gently, quietly, my breath caught in my throat. In kid logic, monsters jiggle doors, shake them, pound on them. Whatever stood outside mine that night didn't behave like that. It behaved like it didn't want to disturb the house. It behaved like it expected the door to open. The knob twitched again, then stopped. The shadow remained. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding against my ribs. Every instinct screamed to call for my dad, but something held me still, the same way you stay quiet when a wild animal walks past your tent. Minutes stretched into forever. Finally, the shadow shifted, slowly sliding away from the doorframe. Not fast, not startled. Calm, controlled, like it was leaving because it wanted to, not because it had to. I waited, and waited, then waited some more. When I finally found the courage to move, I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. No footsteps. No breathing. No creaks. Nothing. I bolted to my bed and crawled under the covers, pulling them up to my chin. The hallway outside remained painfully, impossibly quiet. After what felt like hours, I heard my dad downstairs laugh at something on TV. The distant sound anchored me to reality. Eventually, exhausted from fear, I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, Dad woke me early. "Hey, bud," he said, ruffling my hair. "Come look at this." His voice held forced calm, the kind adults use when they don't want to scare you. I followed him downstairs, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Mom stood at the front window, arms crossed, her expression pale and tight. She didn't look at me. Dad opened the door and pointed at the porch. Snow blanketed everything, but not smoothly. Boot prints, small ones, kid-sized. They started at the sidewalk, crossed our yard, circled the house, then stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. But there were none walking away. No return trail, just the approach. As if someone came to the window and never left. Mom's voice trembled. No child would be out in that storm. Dad knelt beside the prints, studying them. They look off. They did. The toes pointed inward, slightly pigeon-toed. The heels sank deeper than the front. They weren't symmetrical either, like the boots were worn down unevenly. "Do they look familiar to you?" Dad asked Mom quietly. She shook her head. "No, and none of the neighborhood kids have boots that small." Dad checked every lock in the house 3 times. Mom insisted we stay together all day. And me? I didn't mention the shadow under my door or the closet light. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Whoever those prints belonged to, they weren't trick-or-treaters, and they weren't outside anymore. They had been inside the house, upstairs, in my hallway. The police came mid-morning. 2 officers stood on the porch, boots sinking into the fresh snow while Dad explained the situation. They were calm, polite, but their eyes kept drifting back to the prints under my window. One crouched down. "These aren't fresh," he said. "But it snowed all night," Dad replied. "Everything should be covered." "Exactly," the officer murmured, meaning someone walked through the storm early enough for snow to partially fill the tracks, but not enough to completely bury them. As if the visitor came before the worst of the storm hit. Mom invited them inside to talk, but I lingered by the window, staring at the prints. Something about them hooked into my brain. The size, the shape, the strange inward turn. I'd never seen boots like that. Later, after the police left with a promise to increase patrols, Dad checked our entire home. Every window, every crawl space, even the attic. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of forced entry, no footprints inside, no clue how anything or anyone could have gotten upstairs. "You probably scared yourself," Dad told me gently. "Storms do that." But Mom kept glancing at me, her brow creased. She knew I wasn't lying. For the next couple of days, I refused to go upstairs alone. The house suddenly felt alive in all the wrong ways. Every creak in the floorboards sent my pulse racing. Every shadow on the wall made me flinch. But the real fear came on the second night after Halloween. The storm had passed, leaving everything cold and silent. Our house sat dark except for the TV glow downstairs. I was supposed to be in bed, but I couldn't sleep. Something pulled my attention to the bedroom window. Snow drifted softly outside, the ground reflecting the moonlight. And there they were, new boot prints, leading toward the house again. No return trail, just like before. I scrambled from bed and ran to my parents' room, shaking them awake. Dad rushed outside with a flashlight, boots crunching loudly in the snow. But I watched from the window. As he approached the prints, he slowed. He knelt. He said nothing. Mom came behind him, holding her robe tightly around herself. Even from upstairs, I saw the fear in her body language. When they came back inside, Dad locked the door, his face pale. "Don't worry," he told me. "It's probably just a kid messing around." But his voice cracked. My parents slept in the living room that night. All 3 of us did. Yet even then, even surrounded by the people I trusted most, I didn't feel safe. I kept imagining the faint shadow under my door, the closet light, the slow steps in the hallway. Not the parts my parents could explain away, but the parts they couldn't. The next morning, the new prints were gone. Not covered by snow, just gone, as if they'd melted, or been erased, or carried away. Dad called the police again, but nothing came of it. Without damage, without proof of a break-in, there wasn't much they could do. Eventually, life tried to return to normal, but I couldn't forget what happened. And apparently, neither could whoever, or whatever, left those prints. Weeks passed. Snow melted, school reopened, and my parents did everything they could to pretend Halloween had been nothing more than a strange night mixed with a scary storm. For a while, it almost worked. Kids traded stories about canceled trick-or-treating. Teachers complained about icy roads, and the town moved on. But something inside me didn't. The memory lived in small things. A closet door that stood slightly ajar, a faint creak on the stairs, a cold draft across my feet when I walked past the hallway. The prints stopped appearing after the second incident, but that didn't comfort me. It made everything worse, because things that disappear without explanation usually return the same way. One night, around mid-December, Mom asked if I wanted to help hang ornaments on the tree. She tried to make it sound casual, but I could tell she was checking in on me. I agreed and helped string lights across the branches. Dad set up his old vinyl player, letting soft Christmas music fill the room. For a brief moment, the house felt normal, safe, warm. I even forgot to be afraid. But when I went upstairs to grab a box of decorations from my closet, something stopped me in the doorway. My closet light was on again. Not bright, just a faint glow leaking from beneath the door. I froze. For minutes. The house was silent. I stepped back slowly. "Dad?" I called down the stairs, voice shaking. "Can you come up here?" His footsteps pounded immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, out of breath. I pointed at the closet. Dad opened it quickly, bracing himself, only to find nothing inside but coats, boxes, and old toys. He pulled the chain to turn the bulb off. "It's probably loose wiring," he said gently. "I'll check it tomorrow." But he didn't make eye contact. That night, he installed a latch on the closet door. The next night, he added another lock to my bedroom door. The night after that, he moved a dresser in front of the window. He never said it, but he believed me. Even if he wouldn't admit it. Even if he never said the words out loud. Something had come to the house during the storm. Something had tested my door. Something had stood under my window twice. Years have passed since then. I'm older. I'm rational. I'm supposed to understand the world now. But I still lock my bedroom door every night. I still keep my closet shut. And I still have dreams. Cold, snow-heavy dreams about small boot prints leading toward a window. A window with no footprints walking away. I don't know what those prints belong to. A person? A child? Something pretending to be one? I don't know. But I know what I saw under that door. I know what I heard in the hallway. And I know the storm didn't bring it. It was already here. The storm just hit its arrival. Always trust what your instincts tell you, especially when you're young. Fear isn't weakness. It's often your mind noticing danger your eyes can't yet explain. And remember, not every knock, creak, or shadow is just the house. Sometimes the things that scare us do so for a reason. I grew up believing walls could hold memories long after the people living inside them forgot. Our apartment sat above a liquor store whose neon signs flickered at all hours, buzzing like mosquitoes trapped in the wires. The place always smelled of stale beer, dust, and something sour that no amount of pine sol could hide. My mother, Denise, used to say the apartment had character, as if peeling wallpaper and slanted floors were personality traits instead of symptoms of neglect. Back then, she was the kind of woman strangers admired. Cashiers called her Hon, Coworkers told her she was so strong for raising me alone, and neighbors whispered about how she worked 2 jobs and still managed to keep her boy out of trouble. She ate up that praise. It kept her going like gasoline keeps a truck rumbling long after it should have been scrapped. Behind our locked apartment door, though, that version of her vanished. Inside, she moved like a storm system, unpredictable, loud, and impossible to shelter from. You learned to read the signs, the stiffness in her jaw, the way her fingers drummed against the counter, the silence that stretched just a little too long before she snapped. She wasn't violent in the way people picture when they think of abuse. No broken bones, no black eyes. Her weapons were her words, her disappointment, her refusal to show softness. "Don't you look at me like that," she'd say if she thought I looked scared. "Weakness gets you hurt. You better toughen up." I didn't know what weakness looked like. I only knew she believed she saw it in me constantly. If I cried, she called me dramatic. If I hesitated, she called me slow. If I asked for help, she called me ungrateful. And if I ever told her she scared me, she'd laugh like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. But there were good moments too, and that's what made everything confusing. She'd buy me my favorite cereal when she got her tax return. She'd sit on the couch after long shifts massaging her feet, telling me stories about her own childhood, stories about being ignored, about being left behind, about learning early that no one would protect her except herself. I think in those moments, she thought she was teaching me something useful, something she believed would save me. My world was small. The liquor store downstairs, the alley behind it, the laundromat across the street that never closed. Sometimes I would sit on our fire escape after school, watching people go in and out of the store, imagining where they were going afterward. Anywhere had to be better than here. I used to count the trains screeching along the elevated tracks 3 blocks away and wonder what it would feel like to ride one without coming back. When I was 10, I learned the first major truth of my life. Adults weren't the safety nets they pretended to be. It happened on a winter night so bitter the air felt like it could slice your lungs open. I'd gotten home from school tired and cranky, and Denise had already had one of those days, which meant everything I did annoyed her. I folded the sheets wrong, which apparently was enough to yank us both out of the apartment at nearly 1 a.m. to redo laundry at the 24-hour place down the block. "You think I'm playing with you?" she growled, shoving the laundry basket at me. "If you can't learn to do things right, then you're gonna do them again and again until you figure it out." I followed her through the freezing night. The laundromat glowed pale yellow from its buzzing fluorescent lights, humming like a trapped insect. Only one other person was inside, a man with headphones in, bobbing his head to something I couldn't hear. While Denise loaded the washers, I sat on a cracked plastic chair near the fogged-up window. That's when I saw him. A man standing outside the glass, staring in at us. He didn't blink, didn't move. His expression was cold and fixed, like someone who'd already made up his mind about something terrible. I pulled on Denise's sleeve. "Mom," I whispered. "There's a guy out there." She didn't look. "Stop being dramatic. It's late, you're tired. Keep folding." But the man didn't leave. He came inside, and things changed forever. The stranger didn't burst through the door. He didn't shout. He didn't even run. He just stepped inside quietly, letting the heavy glass door shut behind him with a dull thud. His boots tracked in bits of slushy snow that glistened under the fluorescent lights. I froze. Denise didn't notice at first. Her back was turned, her focus locked on shoving coins into the machine. She was muttering to herself, annoyed about a jammed token slot, annoyed at me, annoyed at life, always annoyed. The man walked straight toward her. Even now, decades later, I see him clearly. Heavy coat, hood halfway up, eyes too calm for someone about to do what he did. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady and low, "I need your wallet." Denise turned around, eyebrows raised like the request itself offended her. "Excuse me?" "Wallet," he repeated. Hand it over. I expected Denise to scream, or run, or put herself between me and danger like parents always did in movies. Instead, she squared her shoulders, jaw tightening like it always did before she snapped. "I don't think so," she said. "Pick someone else." Wrong answer. The man didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He just shoved her, hard. Denise hit the metal chair so violently it skidded across the floor. Her head snapped back with a sickening crack. She collapsed. Blood spread across the tile in a thin streak beneath her hair. I didn't move at first. My legs felt cemented to the floor. My heart hammered so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Not the machine spinning, not the heater rattling, not even my own breathing. The man approached her unconscious body and grabbed her purse. He never looked at me, not once. Then he ran. I dropped to my knees beside her. Mom, wake up." Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. I touched her cheek with trembling fingers, feeling the warmth fading from her skin. I didn't know whether to shake her or hold her still, so I did what scared kids do. I wrapped my arms around her and rocked. The man at the far washers, the one with headphones, finally noticed and rushed over. "Jesus, kid, what happened?" I couldn't speak. I pointed toward the door and sobbed. He called 911. The ambulance arrived in minutes, lights flashing red and blue against the laundromat's windows. Paramedics lifted my mother onto a gurney while asking me questions I couldn't answer. At the hospital, a doctor assured me she'd live. Concussion stitches, bruising. "She's lucky," he said. I didn't feel lucky. When she finally woke, she didn't look at me, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't mention the man, the assault, the blood, nothing. She stared at the blank wall and muttered, "We're not talking about this again. Ever." And we didn't. But something changed in me that night. Something important and irreversible. I stopped believing she could protect me. And I stopped believing adults told the truth about danger. Growing up after that night felt like living inside a jar with the lid screwed on too tight. Denise went right back to normal. Her version of it anyway. She worked, she complained, she told neighbors we were fine. She acted like the laundromat never happened, and if I ever brought up the memory, even accidentally, her eyes would go cold. "You're imagining things," she'd say. "Stop living in the past." That man didn't scare me. You're the one who panicked. The attack became a ghost that lived in our apartment. Present, unsettling, never acknowledged. I changed more than she did. I became cautious, hyper-aware. I started watching everyone the way that stranger had watched us through the fogged glass. At school, I sat near exits. On the bus, I never put in both earbuds. At the playground, I kept my back to the wall of the brick handball court Denise noticed, but she didn't understand. "You're jumpy," she'd say. "People will think you're weak." Weak. Always weak. By the time I was 15, we barely spoke unless we were arguing. She thought I was becoming soft, that the world was filling my head with nonsense. The irony never left me. She'd wanted me tough, but she couldn't stand the version of toughness I'd learned. Quiet, observant, distrustful. The kind that came from surviving, not pretending. Our apartment felt smaller every year. The bodega downstairs changed owners twice. The smell of the alley got worse. The train seemed louder, or maybe I was just noticing things now, hearing the threats I'd once ignored, seeing the things adults pretended weren't there. At 16, I got my first job bagging groceries. Not because Denise asked me to, because I needed an excuse to leave the apartment. After school, after work, after late shifts, I walked the long way home. Past the laundromat, past the vacant lot, past the windows where the world looked wider, wider than she ever wanted it to look. One evening during a summer heat wave, I came home later than usual. Denise was sitting at the table, arms crossed, foot tapping aggressively. "You scared me," she snapped. I blinked. "You were worried?" "I didn't say that," she said sharply, "but you don't just disappear." I almost laughed. Disappear? Like she had the night she got knocked unconscious? like she had every time she ignored my fear. But I kept my mouth shut. What if something happened? She demanded. Something did happen, I thought, years ago, and you pretended it didn't. That night, she tried to lecture me about responsibility, about how the world wasn't safe. The same woman who told me I was dramatic now wanted me to accept her panic. Bad people are out there, she said. I stared at her. I know. She didn't catch the meaning. She never did. When I turned 18, something shifted. Not because Denise changed. People like her rarely do. But because I finally had somewhere else to go. A community college 3 towns away accepted me, offering a grant that covered most costs. When I told her, she reacted exactly how I feared. You're leaving me? You think you're better than this? You're running away because you're scared. No, I said quietly. I'm leaving because you are. It was the first time I ever pushed back. The word surprised even me. Denise looked stunned for a moment before anger washed over her face. We didn't speak for days. Move-in day felt like breathing without pain. My dorm was small, but it was mine. A bed that didn't sag, a door I could lock, a window that looked out at a courtyard instead of an alley. For the first week, I had trouble sleeping because it was so quiet. No sirens, no yelling, no footsteps on the stairs at 2 a.m. I thought distance would fix everything. It didn't. Trauma doesn't ask for your permission before jumping in the car with you. For months, I had nightmares. In them, the stranger returned. Sometimes he came through the laundromat door, other times through the dorm window. Sometimes he shoved Denise again. Sometimes he shoved me. Sometimes he walked in calmly, like before, and said nothing. Those dreams always ended with me trying to scream, but finding my throat locked shut. Therapy helped. Slowly. Painfully. It wasn't your fault, my therapist told me. I know. But you don't believe it. She was right. I still felt like the weak child who folded sheets wrong. I didn't visit Denise much. When I did, the energy in the apartment felt wrong, like walking into a freezer. We talked around everything. Weather work, groceries, anything but the night that shaped us both. One visit, she asked abruptly, "Do you think I'm a bad mother?" I didn't expect the question. "I think you were scared," I said carefully. "And you didn't know how to be anything else." She looked down. I tried. I know. We weren't healed, but it was the closest we'd ever come to honesty. By the time I reached my late 20s, I'd built a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. A steady job, a safe apartment, a girlfriend who made me laugh in ways I didn't know I could. People often told me I was calm, observant, grounded. They didn't know those were survival traits, not personality quirks. Denise was older now, softer in some ways, harsher in others. Age has a way of blurring things. I visited her once every month. We talked more easily now, though we still avoided the topics that mattered most. One afternoon, I took her to lunch at a diner near her building. Over coffee, she asked, "Do you remember that night at the laundromat?" My fork froze midair. She swallowed hard. "I wasn't a good mother to you. I know that. But that night, I wasn't pretending it didn't happen. I just didn't know how to talk about it." I sat quietly, the old laundromat lights flickering in my memory. "You were hurt," I finally said. "It scared both of us." She nodded. "I told myself if I ignored it, it couldn't touch you. That if I acted strong enough, maybe you wouldn't be afraid." I exhaled slowly. "I wasn't afraid because of you, Mom. I was afraid because you wanted me to pretend nothing happened." She looked down at her hands, still calloused, still restless. I didn't know any better. Maybe that was true. Maybe not. Either way, she was the only mother I had, and despite everything, part of me still wanted the version of her she pretended to be for the world. "I'm okay now," I said gently. She looked relieved. Good. I always hoped you would be. The rest of the meal passed quietly. Later that evening, I walked past the old laundromat. It looked smaller than I remembered. The fluorescent lights were still buzzing, the windows still fogged at the edges, but the terror was gone, or maybe I'd just outgrown the shadows. Sometimes I wonder how many people carry stories like mine. Moments that shaped them in silence because no one wanted to talk about what happened. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks through a door calmly. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. And sometimes the person you depend on the most teaches you to fear the wrong things. But life keeps moving. So do we. And I've learned the world isn't divided into strong people and weak people, just people who face their pain, and people who pretend it isn't there. Ignoring danger doesn't make it disappear. Facing the truth, even when it's painful, is the first step toward healing. Silence protects no one, but honest conversations can break cycles, mend wounds, and help us grow beyond the things that once controlled us.